Fair is the first line of natural care products to hydrate skin, soften hair, and eradicate ingrowns from head to toe.
Whether you think the bush is back or skin is in, Fur provides beautiful, effective skincare and hair care for up top, down there, and everywhere in between.
That's great, because first goal is to eradicate the stigma around pubic hair, which is something we can get behind.
Absolutely.
And to usher in a new era of body care.
If you're interested in trying Fur products, check out their website, furu.com, and get 15% off with code PERSIST15.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
Hello and welcome to The Persistence. This is She Who Persisted the Nasty podcast. My name is Beatrice, and today I'm not here with Elizabeth. However, I'm not the only person that's going to talk to you today, because what you're going to hear is an interview with the wonderful, amazing, awesome, fantastic LY Marlow. LY is an award-winning author, a distinguished speaker, spokeswoman, and empowerment advocate. Her first book, Color Me Butterfly, won 10 awards, amongst those one of the highest literary awards, the prestigious National Best Books Award. In the interview, you'll hear that she's a very compelling storyteller. She made my job as an interviewer so easy. LY is also the founder of Saving Promise, an organization whose goal it is to, quote, disrupt the cycle of intimate partner violence in at-risk adolescents and young adults and create safer communities for generations to come, unquote. Now, you might wonder why we chose the topic of intimate partner violence and sexualized violence for our Christmas episode. And the reason for that is, unfortunately, around the holidays, we tend to see a rise in intimate partner violence. And being a feminist sometimes implies talking about uncomfortable topics at uncomfortable times, even at Christmas. Now, if you're not ready for that kind of subject, and if you want to listen to something that's, say, less heavy to listen to, then you can listen to last year's Christmas episode titled Feminismus. Please consider that this episode will deal with subjects such as intimate partner violence, sexualized violence, and it's therefore not suitable for all audiences. If you feel like these subjects might trigger you, maybe don't listen to this and listen to our Feminismus episodes instead, for example. I'll link to it in the show notes. All right, on to the interview. Hello, LY. We're so glad to have you on the show because we care deeply about the topic you're working on, and we're both not experts, so it's always great to have experts on the show. So you are the CEO and founder of Saving Promise.
Yes, I am.
And you also launched a campaign now that is called Don't Just Give a Damn, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so can you tell our listeners a bit about why you started your organization, what your organization is about?
I'm happy to. And, you know, I anytime I come into a conversation around this topic, I cannot help but start with my own personal family story, which is I come from a family of 5 generations of mothers and daughters, my grandmother, my mother, myself, my daughter. And it would be the story of my daughter's little girl named Promise that became the 5th generation when my daughter was almost killed for the 2nd time by Promise's father.
Oh, God.
While Promise lay on the bed next to her as he strangled her. And it would be that story that would not only inspire me, but move me literally to walk away from a 20-plus year corporate career to dedicate my life to literally saving Promise. I mean, I know that sounds like a great name, but literally that name came up because the next morning after I discovered that my daughter was almost killed for the 2nd time, I wrote a letter to the only person in the world at that point in my mind and in my heart that I thought could help me, because I had gone everywhere to try to get help for my daughter. We filed restraining orders. I moved her 3 different times to 3 different states.
Wow. Okay.
This is the second time he almost killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, Beatrice, somebody that had the public ear, mind, and heart could probably bring attention to this terrible issue that I know could not only be affecting my family.
Mm-hmm.
So that letter, it was August 25th, 2007. I will never forget that date because that letter started with Dear Oprah. And I wrote this 2-page letter, and I often, Beatrice, go back to that letter for a couple of reasons. One is because I opened the letter up with Dear Oprah and I tell her the story. Last night, my daughter was almost killed for the second time. And I go through the story about, the 4 generations. And now here was my daughter. And now here was little Promise, who was only 6 months old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something in that letter that ultimately became the name for the organization, but more importantly, over time, the mission, which is, I said in so many words, Oprah, if you cannot help me save my daughter, please help me save Promise. And that's how that name came. It didn't come out of, I want to create a name that is going to be catchy. It came out from a mother who comes from 4 generations. And now here was this 6-month-old little girl, literally named Promise,
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to save. And that's how ultimately, right after I sent that letter, August 25th, 2007, I would eventually walk away from my career to dedicate my life literally to saving Promise.
Mm-hmm. And what was the reaction to the letter you wrote?
Well, here's the reaction. And I will say this, and I mean this from the deepest parts of my every being and my heart.
Mm-hmm.
That though I never personally heard back from Oprah, in a way I feel like Oprah did respond by not responding. And the reason she responded by not responding is because she gave me a voice
Mm-hmm.
to go forward and do what I do now. Because I look at the opposite. Most people think, well, we want other people to help us or save us. But I think that if Oprah had responded, I would have probably gone on her show. I would have told my family story. And that might have become my legacy. I was on the Oprah show and I shared my family story. And Oprah probably would have even helped in some kind of way. But the legacy would have been more about Oprah's show and Oprah help versus me wanting to do something to not only save Promise, but to break the cycle in my family. Because now this is 5 generations.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't even in that moment. I was just a mother heartbroken and desperate to save her daughter and her daughter's daughter. Right. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't understand in that moment was that it was bigger than that. It was bigger than just reaching out to Oprah. It was literally about saving Promise.
Mm-hmm. So it was actually the silence surrounding the topic that made you speak up and that made you do something about it.
Yeah, Beatrice, because here's why. And I say this now because it's, that's 2007. It's been over 10 years since I started the organization. Yeah. And most people think that I suddenly had this epiphany to tell my family story because prior to Promise, I had just finished writing my book, Color Me Butterfly, which told the story about the 4 generations. And when that book was published, that book came out the same year that Promise was born. Mm-hmm. So when I wrote that book, Promise wasn't even, a seed in my daughter's womb, Mm-hmm. And so when that book was published, I had just gone through the terrible, atrocious tragedies of my grandmother, my mother, reliving my story, having even, stories like a gun pointed to my head and kicked in my 8-month pregnant belly, whom I was pregnant with at the time with my daughter. And then my daughter struggles of, sexual violence and other issues that were going on in our family as well as a little girl. And so I had just finished writing that book. And now, here was Promise, that book being published the same year that she was born. And one of the things that I would later tell was that my grandmother didn't talk to my mother about it. My mother, quite honestly, didn't really talk to me about it. And I am not ashamed to say that I did not talk to my daughter about it, not in the way that it needed to be talked about. And it was a silence. It was sort of one of those things, what goes in the family stays in the family. And so with that whole notion around what goes on in the family stays in the family mentality that I grew up with, that my mother grew up with, that her mother grew up with, there was that silence that perpetuated, that kept us as women silent about the atrocities that were happening to us in our family at the hands of, domestic violence and even to some extent sexual violence. And now we needed to break the cycle.
And how do we raise awareness about this problem? Because everyone knows it's happening, but nobody wants to talk about it. What do we do?
I think, at the risk of sounding so cliche, but I really believe it really is about breaking the silence and talking about it. And not only when there's a tragedy, a controversy, or a travesty, right? Because, like, for example, I am so, so, so grateful for movements like Me Too. I'm so grateful for those courageous women who step up and who share their stories. I'm so grateful for those women and men, because it's not only women that are abused, men are abused in many ways as well. But I'm so, I applaud the courage it takes to come forward and express your story as a survivor. Around anything that's happened with domestic or sexual violence. I applaud, the stories that come out when there's silence broken, like what we heard unfold earlier in the year at the White House with different figures at the White House. I so recognize and appreciate those stories. But why do they have to come out? Why do we only have to talk about it? And why do we only have to raise awareness about it and it get the visibility that it gets when there is a controversy, a travesty, and a tragedy that comes first before people talk about it? So I believe that the way to really get ahead of this problem is around prevention. And the way to get prevention is to break the silence and begin really talking about it, but not being reactive, but more proactive.
And I suppose that also implies talking to children about it and educating them about it from a very young age. My question would be, how early is too early to start the conversation about intimate partner violence or sexual violence?
So here's the thing that I, even now, 10 years plus into Saving Promise, we recently, this year, rethought our mission. And because our whole focus over the last several years has been around greater public education and prevention. We want to be more proactive. We want to prevent it from happening instead of trying to fix it after it happens. There's a lot of wonderful organizations and groups and advocates and, different community support stakeholders, et cetera, that are doing tremendous work around this area. But much of it is being done in the vein of, let's build shelters after the fact. Let's get more counseling. Let's pay for programs after the fact, right? My attitude is that we need to get on the front end of that problem and start preventing and creating awareness before it happens. So one of the things that Saving Promise just went through this year is a reassessment of our mission. And we said, where is prevention the best effective and the most impactful? It really is most impactful when you can raise awareness and educate and prevent younger generations. And so we just redefined our mission to focus on children, adolescents, and young adults to put forth a very progressive prevention strategy around really preventing young adults, adolescents, and children from becoming victims of domestic violence. So with that mission, to answer your question, what is the earliest age or when is it too young? I personally believe that we need to start educating kids in age appropriately as early as grade and middle school. And in fact, one of the things that we're trying to do right now is launch